Good evening and welcome to the Revere School Committee of the Whole meeting. It's August 16, 2022, currently 5:03. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo,
Here.
Mr. Ferranti,
Here.
Mrs. Gravelisi,
Here.
Here.
Mr. Kingston,
Still here. Still here.
Miss Milbury Ellis,
Here.
Miss Ty,
Here.
Mayor Arrigo.
First item we'll be going over is the consent calendar. Anyone have any questions on the minutes? Moving on, warrants. Anyone have any questions on the warrants? Mr. Ferranti.
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo. Matt, on page 4, number 129, one goal teacher training for 22-5. I understand it's probably a PD, but what is that for?
So One Goal is the program that we have for high school students. You might have recognized at graduation the last couple of years, we had students with the One Goal sashes. So they do an advanced training program while they're at Revere High School, and then their mentor follows them through their first year of college. The program is designed to help kids persist in college and not drop out after their first semester or their first year.
Thank you. On page 8, number 297, Embry and White, $11,936 chairlift repair in Lincoln. I understand what that means, but have we had to put a lot of resources into fixing that chair?
This is the first bill that I know of that came as a standalone bill for that project. So anything prior to this would have been much smaller and just covered off of a routine open purchase order for maintenance.
And my last one is on page 12, 418. Sonva USA, receivers for hearing aids. Just a quick explanation, please.
That is a listening system that we have in a number of classrooms for kids who have hearing deficiencies or hearing loss, and it sets up a sound system in the room so they can hear the teacher and their classmates from a variety of places in the room.
That helps them?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And that's also under the special fund for the special education federal funds that we receive. A small part of that is for assistive technology, so that's why it's under the special fund section.
Ms. Milbury Ellis.
I have a question on page 1, the first item, the $15,000 paid to the career recruitment services. My question is just whether or not we received any type of refund or if the contract allowed for any type of refund where we didn't actually obtain somebody through their services.
I will have to pull that and send the backup to the committee on that.
I can tell you that both of the candidates were hired through that interview process that they did.
The high school principal was hired through them?
I mean, Mr. Bowen had been with us, but he went through the interview process that they coordinated.
Okay.
And Ms. O'Reilly, the deputy principal, came from their search process.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Ms. Ty?
Actually, not a question, but an observation. And when you look at this and you see the homeless transportation every time, is it your experience that this has increased in number or decreased in number or is about the same from years past?
Everything related to transportation has increased, including the homeless. Beginning in September, you'll start to see this broken out between students who had lived in Revere are being sheltered outside of the city and transported back here for school, versus students who are sheltering inside the city, and we're helping get them back to their root school. So we're trying to differentiate this year by account so we can get a better hold of that difference. Also, we just received it. There was $118,000 reimbursement from the state to help with the cost. So they're also tracking the escalation and having something of a reimbursement that comes to us in the month of August.
You know, I mean, it's a societal problem, and I realize that some of these poor kids, the only security they have and the only steady part of their lives comes from the time that they spend in the Revere Public Schools. And but it seems to me that we need more affordable housing, and this is a problem we cannot solve. And it's kind of heartbreaking when you look at it, that these little kids have such turmoil in their lives. Thank you.
Ms. Ty, I can just add, one of the things that we're working on this week with a number of our principals is helping the families that were displaced from the fire at 370 Ocean Ave. We have 11 students who are now considered homeless because they lost their homes there. Some have been able to be relocated in Revere, which is helpful. The principals are working to get those kids uniforms and supplies and materials that they need for school. But we have several of those kids who've been placed in shelters outside of Revere. One I know is in Tewksbury. Another one is in Lunenburg. And for those families, we will be providing transportation to bring their kids back to their Revere schools each day.
Well, I'm so glad that we can do that for them, and enough turmoil in their lives. Thank you.
I just had a question, curiosity. I noticed that we have students going to Valley now. Is that one of the new collaboratives that we're sending students to in Billerica? Do we have a run?
Yes.
I feel bad. It's such a long ride.
Valley would. You'll see Valley showing up both under tuition costs from it's a tuition to Massachusetts schools, but that includes collaboratives that we're not actually a part of. And then you'll also see it popping up under the transportation costs. Both of those accounts, you'll see Valley.
Yeah, I haven't noticed it before, so I wasn't sure if we had some new students that might be going. Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions on the warrants? Okay, moving on. We are financial reports. That was an attachment to our emails. Anyone have any questions on the financials? Mr. Ferranti?
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo. Matt, I noticed on the general ledger that there are a lot of deficits in a lot of accounts.
Sure.
Which I don't remember seeing that many, and I realized that the carry forward of roughly $5 million paid a lot of it. Why was there so many deficits in these accounts this year?
Yep, so that's it. The primary thing that we're focusing on at the general ledger level is that the series itself is not running into a deficit. And if the series is not running into a deficit, then we are okay to have the surpluses or the deficits balancing each other out within the series. So, imagine the Rumney Marsh, we expected 25 teachers, and we had a teacher leave and be replaced with a teacher that was at a higher step. So now that account will be in a deficit for the year, but we're also tracking as we go to know, some others, this person was on a leave and didn't get replaced for 4 months, so there's some money to cover it over there. So the thing to pay attention to is on the main cover of the quarterly report, that at the end of the fiscal year, there's no series that is in a deficit. If that was happening, we would have issued a budget amendment to the city to correct that. But because the series are in the black, the individual accounts are okay to be in surpluses or in deficits. If you wanted to come get very bored, you could come sit in my office and we could look at each of the accounts and say, here's why what we thought we would spend went a little bit over or a little bit under.
Have they been adjusted, this year, the accounts?
Yeah, so the city does not want us doing budget amendments on an account-by-account basis because that would become burdensome and is unnecessary. But what you'll see is, as we tracked actuals through April and May in the budget process, those changes were affected in the budget that you voted that will deal with a lot of these deficits, and then life goes on and there's others that creep up, and that's why we're doing. So Diane and I do a monthly projection at the start of the school year, and then I start to do that weekly in the back half of the year.
And I'll just say, I know, Michael, you and I have talked about this before. You're an accountant, so you get all of this. But when we are planning in May what our budget is going to look like next year, we don't have the specific details to get down to an exact dollar number. So when a line item, like I'll just pick one here. The Paul Revere Building Secretaries was down by $3,912 in a $120 million budget. That's almost like pennies on the dollar, you know? So overall, these numbers add up. And I think that's what Matt's trying to say about as long as the whole series is in the black, that's the important thing.
No, I understand that. I've done this all my life, so I
Right,
understand.
yeah.
I understand how
Well,
it
that's
works.
why I want to not insult you by
No, I
giving
understand.
the
I
explanation,
understand how
but-
it works. But, I mean, I understand that you're looking at the bottom line, but if you have 20 accounts and 15 are a deficit and 5 are good, and even you're still in the black, that doesn't make up for the 15 of deficit. All I really wanted to know is if that, when we did the budget this year, did you make the adjustment on those particular accounts? I know you do it by series, Matt, but you do it on individual accounts. Because can we anticipate potentially the same problem next year?
Right,
Where the
so-
cost of everything's going through the roof.
Yep, so one great example there would be, you have a big deficit in your human resources professionals this year, right? Because that position was not in the appropriated budget 18 months ago. In the budget that you just voted, both of our HR professionals are in there, so you won't see a deficit in that account. But then we correct that one this year, and then as things change, some other things creep up. So that's exactly it.
All right. I do have,
And I nominate Michael Ferranti to sit with Matt and go over
you
each
should come.
item.
Yeah, it'll take us 6 months to do it, but we're okay. Matt, my other question is on the quarterly financial report. I'm looking at the carryover going into 2023 of $14 million. I understand that we had some liquidation of prior years' accounts. Doesn't that seem really high this year?
That's
I
great.
mean, I'm glad we have it, but doesn't it just seem extraordinarily high?
Yep, so if you can scroll down or move to the multi-year carry forward analysis. So we put this together to answer that exact question. So that's correct. We have never had a carry forward in the $14 million range. But the primary reason for that is that we are working to amass a district reserve to help us maintain staffing levels when the ESSER grants come off. So on that sheet, I'm showing you 3 things. The first column is what happened in FY20. This is what we've been more used to seeing, between 5 and 7 million flowing forward. And again, you know, if you just think personally, if you think I'm making $50,000 this year and you only spend 49, that's typical. And then you have 1,000 to carry to the next year. We're just doing that on a much larger volume basis. In the last fiscal year, FY21, you'll notice it was up around 11 million. And the key cause there was working hard to begin to save money toward a district reserve account. And so now this year, we're not only going to have what we saved last year flowing forward, but what we were able to generate this year. So this carry forward number will probably be larger again at the end of FY23, because ESSER 3 has a 3rd year. And then you will begin to see it diminish back down to our typical levels. So this is kind of like a typical slope curve, that you are seeing the highest numbers, and we're giving you the backup to make sure that you have a grip on why would this happen. And we broke it up between how was it generated, so you know where it's coming from, and how we're intending to use it, so you know why it would be so large. And this isn't just us, this is also for the city side auditing to understand how we are preparing ourselves for the future through the wise use of carry forward.
Matt, when do we get the final figure for the carry forward?
They should flip their fiscal year fully at the end of August, beginning of September. So when they do that, I'll have the exact numbers, and then likely in October, we'll move to appropriating it. And I'm preparing you for some of what we're going to use this for here, so that you know, we didn't have $14 million to use in FY23. We have been saving that money strategically.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions on the financials? Thank you, Matt.
Okay.
We appreciate your work. Dr. Kelly?
Thanks, sorry. Just so while we are in financials, I do want to highlight the fact that the reserve amount is higher than we anticipated that it would be. And so we'll be able to, as we typically do when we have that final analysis number, I forget what you told me, we're 1.3 ahead of where we thought we would be, Matt? Or 1.6? I'm forgetting.
Right, so we've been working since ESSER came into existence to build a district reserve account. And at the end of FY23, that reserve will have been built up to the $6 million figure.
Right.
But on that district reserve analysis, you'll also see there's $1,022,000 that Diane's referencing. That is, we can add it to the district reserve if we want, or if we have needs that we see in August, September, October, that money is available to infuse into the budget next year. So that's why we gave you that. Again, that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year scope for you to see how we've been strategically readying ourselves for that. Those conversations can happen now if the superintendent feels like there's a few needs that we have and we want to use some of the excess carry forward for that. And we'll finish those conversations in October together with Ways and Means.
And so with that in mind, there are a couple of positions that I would like to propose to the school committee. One is that the Wayland School is looking for a math interventionist that we did not approve in the first round of requests this fall. The high school is looking for an additional ETL to help service the special needs students, which are ever increasing in number. At most schools, we have, our ETLs have a caseload of around 50 to 60. The ETL at the high school's caseload is currently over 100. And so they're looking to add a second ETL at the high school for that. And then Principal Bowen has asked for an additional position to work full-time on restorative practices with students during the school day. And also asked for some professional development funding to do to hire a company that does work on project-based learning in cross-disciplinary classrooms. So I'd like to, if we can, seek those, start seeking those 4 pieces of the 3 positions and the 1 professional development now, rather than wait until October, knowing that it won't be anywhere near the $1 million that Matt sees as the surplus.
You're not requesting us to do that at this moment, right?
Yes.
She is. Yeah. I mean, if it doesn't have to be at this moment, could it be at the next meeting, or?
In September, to
It
kind
could
of,
be tonight?
well, it's a last minute, it's not on the agenda, it was no discussion, that's my thoughts on it. I'm not saying they're not important.
Dr. Kelly, approximately for the 4 positions, what are we looking at, for numbers, paying?
I think we'd probably be looking at about 300,000.
Well, I have only one concern, well, maybe more than one concern, but because I think anyone at the high school level trying to deal with 100, I mean, that's totally impossible. So I figure no one would be served properly on that. And the other concern I have, though, is that if we wait until September, who's going to be left out there? I mean,
No
we'll
one there
probably.
now.
There's no one there
No one there
Yeah,
now.
I know, I
It's
agree,
very
it's now. So if, I mean, I assume that these jobs will be taken by people who are already in our system.
We would still need to, you're probably right,
You
but we
still
would
have to
still need to
rehire
back.
them.
Yeah, oh, yes, I agree.
Yeah.
You need 4 people.
But at some point, I mean, we need to worry about who's out there. And I don't want to denigrate any of those folks, but maybe some people
Yeah.
will come back. Well, so I'm okay with doing it today.
Ms. Gravellisi?
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo. I just wanted to say that I feel these positions are important, and if we don't act on them now, it will be a delay in these services that you... Oh, it's not on?
Oh,
It's on.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Oh, it's on. I feel like it'll be a delay in the process, and it's important to get these started, so I'm in favor of it if we're going to take a vote. I don't know what we're going to do with this, but that's just my opinion.
That would be done on the floor at our regular school committee meeting. I just, my thoughts are, if it was that important, that there should, I've already forgot what positions, I didn't write them down, each one. I think if it was important, it should have been presented to us prior to this. And I do think the positions are important from what I remember, but not at the last minute.
Can we have Dr. Kelly repeat them again, so that...
No, that's fine. You're going
No,
to vote the way you want to
I'd like you to
vote.
repeat them, please.
The first one is an additional ETL at the high school. The second one is a math interventionist at the Wayland Elementary. The third one is a restorative practices position or interventionist at the high school. And then a piece with a company called Nuvux that the new principal would like to engage to work on interdisciplinary projects.
Could you explain a little more about that?
Sure, it's a company, it's called Nuvux, Nuvux. And they have modules that are pre-created that create interdisciplinary projects that kids can work on in their history class, in their science class, in their math class. And it's more of a longer-term project. I think they're called modules. I'm forgetting exactly what they're called. But there are different aspects of the project that they do in each class. And Principal Bowen felt this would be a good way, engaging with this company, to help more teachers at the high school understand how to create their own such projects. If they were to work with the company, there is a professional development component that comes with it. And then the sample modules would help them develop their skills in building these kinds of modules themselves.
And I will say that I spoke to Principal Bowen on this, and it really did sound like a great piece that could be utilized and successful here. I'd like to see it in middle school.
So will we be adding this to the late communications on the agenda for 6 o'clock?
Someone would have to make a late motion.
Okay.
Thank you, and my apologies for not getting that information to you sooner.
Next item would be communication. Oh, food service, none. Moving on to communication and disposal of technology equipment. Anyone have any questions on the communications? Enrollment update. We all received an update on the enrollment. Anyone had questions on that? Seeing none?
I have a
We're on-
question.
Okay, Ms.
Sorry.
Milbury Ellis?
What was the number last year? Wasn't it like 8,000 students or no?
Not quite, no, I think that last year we were at 73, maybe? Yeah.
Do we know what the reason is for the decline?
So this number that you're looking at is only our internal enrollment. It doesn't include students who are outplaced. Robin, maybe we should add that to the bottom of this from now on, so that we get the full number. That's what the numbers end up looking different.
Thank you.
But I do want to point out that, again, we've been able to manage to keep our class sizes relatively low. The one place that we continue to struggle is at the Paul Revere, but even there, the class sizes are in the mid-20s instead of the 30s, which is where they'd been for a couple of years. So the increased staffing has enabled us to keep those classes smaller than typical. There are a couple of other spots that are a little bit higher than we'd like. For example, at the Garfield grade 4, those are up at 23, 24. And then I feel like there's one at the Lincoln. Yeah, the Lincoln first grade, 24s and 25s. But it's still much better than where we were.
Any other questions on the enrollment? Moving on, personal items. Any questions about the new hires or any other items? I'm hoping today's luncheon with our new hires went well.
It went great. I was, I forget who I was talking to later in the day, but I was just saying how awesome it was to see so many excited, enthusiastic, happy people ready to take it on. We had 79 teachers today. 16 of them were actually with us last year, but came on after new teacher orientation had happened. And because it's a requirement of the state in order for people to get their professional license, that they complete the orientation program, they had to come back and join us this summer for that program. Everybody I spoke to was happy, and they were very thankful for the lunch from Domino's, which was sponsored by the school committee. So thank you for making them feel special and welcome today with that.
I am sorry I did miss it. Unfortunately, layover and airport issues, I could not get there, but I hope to see all the new ones soon. Okay. Next.
Excuse me.
Ms. Gravellisi.
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo. On the transfers, the translator from the PIC to the multilingual department, no name was listed. Was that Erica?
Yes, Erica Garcia.
Okay.
Okay, on to, we have no school field trips, we have no donations. Anyone out there want to donate, feel free. So we're all set, Ms. Gravellisi?
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo. Within this packet, and I don't see it under the consent calendar, is the approval of the student activity accounts. And for some reason, I feel last year, we forgot to actually take a vote on
That
this.
would have
and
been under
approve
financials.
it.
No?
It's right here. But for some reason, last year,
I didn't get it.
I don't remember, I think there was miscommunication, and we had to re-vote on it because we didn't vote on the student activity accounts last. Do you remember that? We didn't specifically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that last.
Is he still down there? I do have a vague recollection of that.
Remember that?
Yeah.
None of us knew. Yeah, I just saw it. Oh,
Did you see it, Robinson?
no, I just got it in this
Right, yeah,
package.
so we never saw it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we never saw it.
okay. So I just saw it, and I wanted to make sure that
Did you see it, John?
he has it. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure it was voted on properly this year. Would we need Matt for us to vote on it, where he has his communication here with the explanation? I don't think we'd need,
I don't think we need to, yeah,
I don't think we need Matt to vote on it, I just think we need to vote on it.
okay.
Okay. Yeah, you read that.
Yeah, just before.
It's right after the new hires.
It was late getting to me. Did we get it in the packet? The paper packets, yes, I got it late.
Oh, you want Diane's? And in here it says, Please note that the student, list of student activity accounts, and they need a vote to approve for the 2022-2023 school year. For some reason, I feel like we I mean, I realize it's under the consent calendar, which, so it would fall in there, but last year we didn't formally vote on it, and we had to come back and make an official vote.
So are you saying we need to take this out of the consent calendar and vote on it separately?
I think that would be, that way it's on record
If
that
it
we
makes it
voted.
easier, then let's remove this from the consent calendar, and we can vote after the consent calendar on it.
Thank you.
Where are we? Oh, guess what? Okay, next item is the bus route changes. So we have Denise Senna and Dave Patch here from the transportation. And hopefully they have some good information for us, or if we have any questions on what we received in the packet. Please ask questions,
Sure.
because they sat here all this time.
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo, is it okay if I kind of frame this for us?
I would love it.
All right, great. So I want to thank our Director of Transportation, Denise Senna, and our Assistant, David Patch, as well as Paul Amato for the visual that you're about to see, and Ann Bothronis for working on all of these bus routes, and really trying to make our transportation plan much more accessible to families and user-friendly and filled with visuals. In terms of changes, the changes the only changes that were made were the changes that were presented at our last school committee meeting, and were at the elementary level. At the elementary level, we maintained bus service to the most extreme points of the city, those that live in North Revere, those that live across Squire Road, and those that live across Park Ave in the Parkindale area. So that we will still be providing service to all of those areas at the elementary level. The middle school and high school routes stayed roughly the same. Through a lot of hard work, this is going to be our transportation page on the website that's been revamped for families to be able to access. You'll see that we have our 3 points of contact, including, beyond Dave and Denise, Kiko, our wonderful administrative assistant, who is bilingual and speaks Spanish, and has done a great job of working with families and answering questions and fielding phone calls. In addition, below the contacts, you'll see that all of the bus routes are hyperlinked, and they are sorted by level, elementary, middle, and high, as well as by school. So, Dr. Kelly, if you want to click on one of them, if a family was looking into what's going to be my Susan B. Anthony route, it brings them right to this page that gives a full page visual of the school map, as well as all of the stops that the bus makes. And probably most importantly, and the questions that we've got over the years, is what's an estimated time that the bus is going to arrive at each stop. Under the old format, families really had to guess. They would have the departure time, but never know, if my son's on the 4th stop after the departure, what time is that bus going to get there? The times are obviously not exact. As we all know, traffic is a variable. So we do kind of give the heads up to families that they should anticipate having their student there 10 minutes before the estimated arrival time, just to ensure that they do not miss the bus. And again, I can't thank those people that I named enough, as well as Jamie Flynn, who served as our kind of outside set of eyes editor for these routes. It was a full team effort, and a lot of work poured into this to get this up and running for families.
We also have to thank you, Dr. Calucci, for the work that you've done and the leadership that you have shown to give this team some wings to fly and make it more cohesive throughout the city.
Thank you, but they make it very easy. The other point that I'll add is that once these routes are approved this evening, I've already spoke to the Journal and the Advocate, so they will be able to, they've assured me that they can run all of those visuals for families, which is a big change from the old days of just all text and trying to locate the route that your child takes. So very excited for that as well.
Mr. Ferranti?
Richie, are they gonna go in this week or next week's paper? Bus routes,
Next week's paper.
next week's paper?
Yeah.
And my last question, were there any major changes, with the bus routes this year, or added or subtracted out? The major one?
Only at the elementary level and only if it was less than a mile from the school. And that was really related to equity. We had elementary children that lived just under a mile at other elementary schools that did not get bus service. So we looked at those routes that were under a mile, did not have an extreme point that would have caused danger, and that was the primary changes.
Thank you.
Yes, and primarily at the Whalen, in the Mountain Ave area specifically.
Ms. Milbury Ellis?
Sure. Well, in addition to the newspapers, will they also be disseminated through like Class Dojo and whatever other modes that the schools use?
Yes, absolutely. All call from the district level, but then pushed out via school-based channels. I think what we're going to do is kind of push out the link to draw people to the website in this new page, because they're going to look at the bus route initially, but along the school year, they may have questions and remember that that page exists.
Anyone else have any questions? Thank you, everyone, for the work.
I'd like to just make a motion to approve the bus route changes, because that's what they have for, we have to approve them. Yeah. It's not on the next
Go for it.
I'd like to make a motion to
Anyone want to
approve
use my book?
the bus route changes.
I'll second that.
Roll call?
Mrs. Bronson Rizzo,
Yes?
Mr. Ferranti,
Yes.
Mrs. Gravellisi,
Yes.
Mr. Kingston,
Yes.
Mrs. Milbury Ellis,
Yes.
Ms. Ty,
Yes,
Mayor Arrigo.
Again, thank you, everyone, for your hard work.
Great job.
And the last item is for regular meeting agenda, but I did ask if we could just briefly go over the handbooks. Normally, we would meet as a subcommittee, but due to work and vacations, it was a little difficult to do. So if we could do it at committee of the whole, we can start with the K through 5 book. So did anyone have any questions on some of the changes for the pre-K through 5? No questions? Love it.
I can bring it, do you want me to bring them up as you go over
If you
them?
can, that'd
Yeah.
be helpful in case someone has a
Sorry, it took
question
me
we
a
can
minute
refer
to-
to.
Okay. Okay. I think there were very few changes to this handbook. There was just date changes, correction of who the school committee and roles are. Why does this look so horrible?
is this the one we're working from now? Because there were two different iterations of this?
Yes.
Oh, okay. We just need to change the front page and the order of the school committee.
All right, hold on. I don't know why I can't see this right.
And I did notice the more typos were
Could you maybe give me those offline? Okay.
Ms. Ty, what needs to be changed?
Just, nothing of any substance. Oh, the thing on the very front of the page,
Can you put your mic on, please?
there are two different.
I don't know, this is, what I'm showing here on the screen is with the edits. This is the pre-K to 5.
Oh, that's wrong. After, we should be in alphabetical order.
Oh, you're right. Yep,
After Susan,
yep. Fixed.
that was in her, that was on all of them.
Yes, okay, I'll have them fix that. Okay. Let me just scroll here. The calendar, of course, was updated.
So no one had questions on the elementary one, so we can move, did anyone have any questions on middle school? Does anyone need Diane to pull it up to refresh?
Why don't you do that, please?
So are we moving on to the high school handbook?
I think Carol asked me to pull this one up, the middle school.
Yeah, I can just point out.
Okay, yeah, they're just,
baby.
And I don't know if we want to make a decision about gender neutral language. Instead of the he and she all the way through.
did we
Carol,
already
put your
do that?
microphone on, please, for the
Oh, I'm
TV.
sorry. I think in some of the others, we might want to make the decision about whether we want to use, for pronouns, whether we wish to use S/HE, which is the one that was maybe 20 years ago recommended by the National Council of Teachers of English, or do we want to be gender neutral and use the plural to apply, instead of his or her, it would be they, them, their, and theirs. I don't know if we want to make those changes. I think we probably should, but I don't think there's any law about it. I think it's a matter of judgment.
I do feel where this is all electronic, that perhaps when we, talk, we might want other verbiage change, that maybe we can talk later about it more, and I mean, maybe I'm assuming it's easy because it's electronic, but Ms. Kelly, is it? Dr. Kelly?
Yeah, I think it would be very easy to just do find replace for the S/he and put in the they, them. I think it would be relatively easy.
Ms. Ty, is that all right with you?
Yes,
Okay.
that has happened before, where you just say, find the he, the his, and it's a miracle. I don't know how it works, but Robin does, and that's all that counts.
Gosh. Okay, moving on to high school. I feel there might be some questions here, so if you may pull that one up, we'd appreciate it. Yeah, I almost said Dakin. Dr. Kelly. Oh. I was waiting for her to come up. Miss Gravellisi.
Thank you, Mrs. Rizzo. Not so much a question. I did want Diane to pull up, because the attendance policy has always been, controversial for the past year. And I was happy with the edits to the policy, and I thought that that would be something we could bring up and discuss,
Yeah.
so that it is, understood completely by us, by the constituents, if there's any concern, the students, the parents, because that seemed to be one issue that was a bit contentious this past year.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we had talked a little bit about earlier, where rumors can take on a life of their own. And I know there was a whole narrative last year about attendance doesn't count anymore, attendance doesn't matter anymore. And we actually learned when we were actually it was you, Dr. Galucci, right, who was in a group with students, and the student said, well, do you want to share that anecdote?
Sure. The student had come to Revere Public Schools as a sophomore, was a newer student to the building, and she shared that she got off to a very good start, solid start, began experiencing some difficulty kind of midway through the year, and when she attempted to get back on track and say, what's the work that I need to make up, she had been absent for a bit, and she had heard from staff members, oh, there's no attendance policy. She did not have any follow-up about the work that was missing, and kind of planning for making up that work. As you know, when you're absent and it's a departmentalized schedule, you have makeup for 4 or 5 classes. And she said, when I didn't hear from anyone, it kind of affirmed that attendance didn't matter, and what was being said by particular staff members was true in her mind. And she found it helpful to kind of sit in this meeting with high school teachers and counselors and administrators and share that story, in the hopes that next year that message is going to be that attendance does matter, and that you have to be in class in front of your teacher each and every day, or to the fullest extent possible. It was a really moving story. It wasn't prompted by anything. In fact, we were talking about, we were talking about attendance, but there were specific bullets that we were supposed to be discussing, and myself and a math teacher at the high school kind of turned the floor over to her because she really wanted to share this story. And then she was courageous enough to share it out to the whole group. Really powerful moment in the 4-hour meeting, which was extremely well run by Ms. Riley and Mr. Bowen.
I have to, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Galucci. Anyone else have,
So
Dr.
Mr. Amato,
Kelly?
sorry, if we can pull up if you could show my screen? There we go. And do you want me to just summarize it? Oh, you.
Ms. Milbury Ellis?
I was just going to ask if I think now would be an appropriate time for Dr. Kelly to reiterate what the attendance policy is, what the expectations of the students are. Yeah, exactly. That was going to be my suggestion.
Great, thank you.
So I can soundbite this.
Yes, yes, please do.
Sounds good.
And the attendance policy has been in our handbook. It was in there last year. One of the things that changed, and I think this is where there was some confusion, is there used to be a policy that said if you were absent so many days in a term, you would automatically fail. And that is, as the research will show, and as we have discussed many times, an inequitable practice, so that kids who live in poverty typically suffer more from such a policy than kids who don't. Because kids who live in poverty often work after school to help support their families. In some cases, they're working overnight. They might wake up more frequently late for school than other kids. There are just a number of reasons why kids who live in poverty are late to school or absent from school more than their peers. And when we talk about grades representing what kids know, automatically failing them because they were not present for a particular number of days is inherently unfair, especially if a student can earn passing grades in a class despite their excessive absenteeism. So absenteeism is something that is covered by the law. We have to report it to the state for every single student, and we do, and we report it accurately. Kids who are absent more than 10% of the time are considered chronic absentees. In our world, that means 18 days in a year. But the state also says that more than 7 absences in a 6-month period is cause for concern. And depending on the age of the child, we react to that 7 absences in a 6-month period by engaging the appropriate social services to help the family where kids are not getting to school, or to help the child who might need services themselves. So we continue to adhere to all of these pieces that are in the attendance policy. It goes through and talks about excused absences. We talk about not having automatically excused absences. All of this information is the same as it has been and the same as it was last year. Unfortunately, the idea that we stopped automatically failing kids took on a narrative of its own. And from one student's anecdote, that came from staff members, which is unfortunate. But it's incumbent upon us to make sure that parents and the community have the right information. And that is that we expect all children to be in all classes every day. And one of the things that we're going to do is ensure that when a student is absent, that there is contact with the family so that the parents can weigh in. The student that Richie just gave the anecdote about said that if somebody was calling her mother would have said, "Get your butt in class." But because nobody was calling her mother to say that she was absent, that's where the challenge came from. So we're definitely going to move back to our typical practice of making sure that there's adequate family connection and communication, especially when kids are absent. And Mr. Bowen and the rest of the staff at the high school are going to make it perfectly clear to students and parents that the expectation is that kids are in their classes every day, every period.
Ms. Milbury Ellis.
Could you follow up on what the procedure would be for students who are off program or considered cutting class? Because I know that, if attendance is taken first thing, a student could come into class and then technically just walk out and leave and not come back for the rest of the day or miss a period. How does the school handle those types of situations?
So at the high school, attendance is taken every period. So if a student, for example, misses first period but comes in for second period, they would be absent first and then present second, and so on and so forth. If they come in late to any class, there are different degrees of tardiness that's recorded based on how late they are. So if they're within 5 minutes of being late, it's a regular tardy. If they're more than 10 minutes late, it's more extensive. And then I believe it's when it gets to the 20-minute period that they say, now you're pushing on not getting credit for this class because you've been late too much. It's almost an absence kind of thing. And I forget exactly what those numbers are. I believe they are in the handbook. And Mr. Bowen can give clarity on that. For high school students, it's a little bit different at the other schools. But if a student is absent from class and a teacher is looking at their attendance, I'll just talk about myself anecdotally. When I would go to enter my student attendance, if I saw they'd been in class earlier in the day but weren't in my class, they were questioned about it. And if there wasn't a good story to go along with the absence, I called home and told the parents that they had skipped my class. That's the initial reaction. When that becomes a more chronic behavior, then the administration comes into play, and the administration should be calling home to say, we've got a bigger problem here that we need to solve. And it's dealt with that way. But typically, if a student cut my class, they would have to serve a teacher session and make up that time with me after school on my department night. And, that's how kids learn that they can't skip.
And are parents notified?
Yes, anytime a child has any kind of discipline, parents are notified. So including a teacher session is a discipline. I really think that part of what has happened is we've gotten away from telephone communication, and we rely so much on text and email and dojo and things like that. And I think sometimes when there can be over communication on those platforms such that they almost become muted, and you don't pay attention as much to the messages because you think it's just Dr. Gallucci again talking about what might be a snow day or, whatever the case may be. And so I think we really need to go back to our roots of actually making phone calls and talking to human beings on the phone.
Dress code. They crossed off the headgear, and I know it's been a conversation we've had in the past, and we decided to go back to what we have, but it is my hopes that in September, we will be meeting with the Student Advisory Committee of 5 students and the Policy Subcommittee to go through student portion of our policies, and that's the first one that they want to look at. So for now, where it's easy to do that electronic changes, can we go back to the original? Ms. Milbury Ellis?
I would suggest that we take a look at, or the drafters of the high school policies, take a look at City Lab's dress code policy, because it seems to be very clear, and really presents more of a policy in the sense that it's just, there's no ambiguity as to what the expectation is. I think it's a really good policy, the way they have it drafted, and that might want to be considered for the high schools.
Also, we have new guidelines on policies for headgear, and we just received some helpful policy that we can interpret into our own handbook from MASC in their council. So I would like to bring that up at September for a policy meeting, too. It'll be very helpful to all of us. Ms. Milbury Ellis.
Sure, I just had some questions on some of the policies that have not been mentioned yet, or just some areas within the handbook.
Can I say, sorry, one more
Sure.
thing on the headgear before we move on? I think the committee is aware that a new law was passed, and banning headgear is considered illegal.
I was
So-
told it has nothing to do with the headgear unless it's religious.
Did you look at the legal advisory that came from Valario, Dominello, and Hillman?
Did you send us that portion?
I did.
But it didn't have headgear. It had, but they were talking about your religious headpieces, not, we're not talking about a baseball cap or anything like that.
It said bans on headgear of any kind are illegal.
Spoke to, well, not our council, but I did speak to council. They wrote up a whole policy for school committees to use, and then had quite a discussion with other districts in the state that didn't see it that way at all. So, again, I would just like to keep this piece back in, be respectful of how we have been when it comes to headpieces for certain culture reasons. And again, make it first thing in September to do.
And if I may add to that, Dr. Kelly, maybe, as I recall, this was kind of a blanket statement from them. I don't recall how much background that our own council included with that. Maybe you could check that out, if you could, please, and let us know.
Yeah, that would be helpful for us to have for that committee meeting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I recall is that you, when you sent us out something, and I might have it somewhere, was that there was a ban, that was illegal, and that's what our council said. But I don't recall if he gave any additional information or supporting cases or whatever with it. So could you check that to see if he did, or if he didn't, maybe ask him to do that?
Sure, and I'm going to forward, I sent the client advisory to committee members Rizzo, Gravelisi, and Milbury Ellis because they're on the policy subcommittee. But I will forward this to all of you so that you can take a look at it.
Okay, thanks.
If I can figure out how to do that.
Okay, Ms. Milbury Ellis.
Sure. On page 7 of the high school handbook, is it page 7? I'm looking at, there's a number 7 at the bottom, but it's probably
I know the page is messed up.
2, 3. It's page 7 of the table of contents. I'm just going to give my 2 cents and suggestions, take them for what they're worth. I'll just go through them quickly. Under social expectations, if we could, my suggestion would be, instead of respect diversity, it would be demonstrate respect for oneself and for all others. I have a question on page 2.
The one, sorry, if I could, there was a committee of students, parents, and staff who created the Revere High School core value statement. And I know they labored quite a bit over the language on every bit of it. So I would just be a little hesitant to wordsmith what they came up with.
Perhaps we can add as another one.
Sure, I can ask them to reconvene the committee and.
Well, I don't think we need to do all that. What's our purpose here? Do we have, if we don't have say in what's here in the policies, then are we wasting our time, or do we have say?
We set the policies.
Yeah.
I don't know if it should be worded differently.
It's not listed as a policy.
It's listed.
So I think the confusion is that the school committee sets the policy, as Mrs. Rizzo just said, and the school department creates handbooks to guide parents and students and teachers and staff members in how those policies will be implemented. So with that, the school committee has the right to approve handbooks before they are put into print to parents and students, because they're loosely representative of a roadmap on how policies will be implemented. But I would say that it would be beyond the purview of the school committee to change things that committees in schools had spent time deliberating and studying and drawing up.
Can I just ask, are we talking about the school core values?
Yes, the Revere High School core value statement.
And Ms. Milbury Ellis, can you refer back to what you were speaking on? Which line?
Under social expectations, I would just include, I would like to have included as a social expectation of high school students to demonstrate respect for oneself and all others.
I have to say, I truly agree with that, but I would ask it as a request, please, or we can just,
Yeah, I'm not looking to make a big deal about it, but it's, I mean, we're looking at core values here, and it just seems kind of obvious that
we're not,
we're missing something here. That's all. I mean, I don't want to cause any extra work. I don't want you to have to reconvene, but perhaps an email to the committee, or when they're going through these things and we're going to have to vote on them, perhaps they can come before us and let us know that, hey, this is what we're doing, this is, so that we have an opportunity to at least give some type of feedback for consideration, instead of waiting until now. If
Well,
that's okay.
and typically that does happen. Like, this core values document was written about 4 years ago. Do you know what I mean? So, and at the time that schools are doing that work, as you can see, the work takes years and years and years to do. At the time that schools are doing that work, they often do come and give presentations to the school committee to talk about the work that they're working on. And I believe that this core values document was developed in conjunction with when they were doing the portrait of a graduate work. And it probably is time to revisit all of that, quite frankly. But I don't know that this committee, or me, or all of us together, just saying we think it should say this, gets the work done, because I think it's work that needs to be done by the people in the school, the teachers, the
Yeah, that's
parents, the
fair.
students.
it needs to be
That's
done,
fair.
Dr. Kelly, but I think they need to know how we feel about this, and to kind of understand where we're coming from, and not saying they need to change their work, but the respect diversity, when I always brought up my children to respect all, I don't know, I think we need to be inclusive, and I think maybe some kind of add-on, or if they could just take it as a suggestion, that would be,
I will absolutely
I
pass the
think,
message on.
respectful.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. May I move on?
Please do.
Um,
And I,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
it's 6:06.
Okay.
Ms. Melberry?
Okay,
Alice?
my next question is on page 2. There's a protocol for violations of the academic honor code, and I was just curious as to, it seems from reading this that the parents are not informed at level 1, and I was just curious as to why that is.
Any of you work on that, Christina, maybe?
I wrote it, yeah. Well, I didn't write, I'm sorry, that was the misrepresentation. I shared one of the committees for it, so the level 1, I don't have it. What's that?
Can we ask? Thank you.
It's hard without having the honor code in front of me.
I know.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Christina Porter. I'm the Director of Humanities. So several years ago I worked on it, so without having it in front of me. The level 1 violation is the student admits it. Is that correct?
Yes.
I can bring it up for you.
If you brought it up for me, that'd be helpful. So the parent is informed eventually. I just have a hard
Yeah,
time
the parents
speaking to it
informed
without.
at level 2.
Yeah.
Level 1, it says it's,
Thank you.
do you have
No,
it
no,
pulled up?
it's okay.
Oh, I lost it?
I have it, but right here.
Okay.
There you go.
Probably not gonna be able to read it from here. Okay.
So, level 1 is a student-teacher conference, and the
Yeah.
primary goal is to resolve the issue.
Yeah.
I think that part of the strategy with
Yeah.
that is that these kids are becoming young adults,
Yes.
and
That's correct. Sorry, I just needed to have it in front of me. So at this point, if the student admits to it and they, can complete the correction plan, it doesn't feel like it needs to proceed. At this level, if the student said, well, you would skip right over this level. If the student said, no, like this didn't happen, then you'd proceed directly to the next level. So the idea was like young adults should be able to, they can work it out, have accountability with the teacher, come up with a plan that folks are comfortable with, that it would just stay there. And that's why the parent isn't informed. Sorry, wasn't
Great, thank you.
expecting.
No,
No
that's good.
problem.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Ms. Melberry Ellis?
I'm sorry, I'm cognizant of the time here. I think our next meeting is, we're approaching.
But if you have questions, please
I do
ask.
have- Okay, so I'm just going to move on to the one that I really... The language of the OFF program, it's on page 50. Every student is assigned to a room or area for each of the 4 periods and lunch period every day. Students who are not where they are scheduled to be are off program. And then it goes on, a student's ability to succeed in school is severely impacted by choosing not to attend class. Therefore, the natural academic consequences are severe. But then the next question is basically like, they're going to participate in attendance and academic intervention programming. And then there's also discipline penalties, which could result in suspension. I would just suggest that you reconsider how that's worded.
tell me again where you are, I'm sorry.
Sure, I'm on page 50, under off program. It's for the consequences for when a student cuts class. The statement is basically that the consequences are severe, but the sentence that follows is basically like, not really severe. You're gonna have to participate in attendance and academic intervention programming and get reengaged into the education. But then if you follow it down, there's a paragraph that's been omitted, and then there's a highlighted area that says that it could result in suspension or eventual expulsion.
I
I'm just
see.
saying you just
Okay.
need to reword it. I'll stop there.
Okay, anyone have any questions on the athletic handbook? Oh, Mr. Kingston,
I just have a
my
question.
apologies.
I apologize. It's just a quick question. Aren't the handbooks distributed when school starts? So if we wait to talk about it next month, school's already been in session for a couple of weeks.
We're trying to cover this so that we can vote on this and approve them at our meeting.
But we've
At
talked about
6?
making changes, so how's that gonna?
But that
So the
is
assumption is that those changes would be made
electronically.
electronically, and so with the discussion that we're having here tonight, those changes would be made, and you would know that you're approving the books with assuming those changes.
Okay. My thought was I didn't want to delay the handbooks getting out when school started, because I
No.
think that's important. Well, it's important to me, anyway. Thank you.
That's why I didn't want to wait for a subcommittee, because I wanted to get it done for this evening.
Fine. Just a little clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the other thing to Mrs. Rizzo's point is, if we needed to update something in September, we can do that and then just send a new notice to parents saying, we've updated the handbook, this is what has changed.
Athletic handbook, anyone questions? Faculty handbooks, anyone? And I forgot, City Lab, very important one. It was very well worded. I'm really impressed. Anyone have questions? And last one would be support staff. Any questions? So I am going to ask the Policy and Procedure Subcommittee if they would be comfortable bringing this to the school committee under subcommittees for approval.
Okay, I'd like to make the motion to bring the handbooks to the 6 o'clock meeting for approval of the committee of the whole.
I'll second that.
Thank you, ladies. At this point, do we have a motion for an adjournment?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
So thank you, everyone. We'll see you very shortly.